You have to admit it was well planned and they executed it. The afterthought is that, my goodness, they had it together. I lost the election. But you have to understand, you're talking about a forbidden subject. No one wants to talk about Jews. It's a no-no. It's like you're talking about something that's wrong. You're not even supposed to give your opinion.
So you think it's very difficult for me to even ask questions about the Israel lobby in Washington?
Absolutely. Very difficult to get answers. Very difficult to get interviews. I hope you're successful. I wish you well. It's going to be rough.
Again, there's a new Hitler, and he's the president of Iran, and he intends to build nuclear weapons, and his brazen declarations against the Jews in America have been carried on the front pages of America's newspapers. Ladies and gentlemen, we must demonstrate courage. We must demonstrate intellectual honesty. We must demonstrate the willingness to stand up and to speak out. We must act now to stop Iran before the maniacal dream of exterminating the Jewish people becomes a nuclear holocaust. And I am hopeful that the American government will have the courage to help Israel in its day of adversity against tyrants. I don't think there's ever a time that you can say you have enough support. I think that our objective is to always let our elected officials know that, A, we do support Israel, and that if anyone comes against Israel in a malicious way, we would do everything in our power to see that that was their last term in office.
I'm a United States Senator. I'm not an Israeli senator. I'm a United States Senator. I support Israel. But my first interest is I take an oath of office to the Constitution of the United States, not to a president, not to a party, not to Israel.
Hagel's record is very, very troubling on the nation of Israel. He has not been a friend to Israel.
Senator Chuck Hagel is a top candidate to become the new defense secretary in the second Obama administration, but there is some opposition questioning Hagel's support for Israel.
Chuck Hagel, if confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, would be the most antagonistic Secretary of Defense toward the state of Israel in our nation's history.
Just yesterday, there was a new speech that they believe in which, during the question and answer at Rutgers University, he claimed that the State Department was controlled by the Israeli government. It was the Israeli Foreign Ministry controls the State
what they're
Department.
doing is they're going after every...
Well, there's two things wrong with that. One is that it's you know, kind of suggesting Israeli powers controlling things. Number two is that of all the branches of the government, the State Department being the most pro-Israel branch is
based on every statement I've heard out of any Republican in the last 2 years, the Israelis are controlling our government.
Not the State Department, that's for sure.
Okay.
The U.S. gives Israel $15 million a day and billions annually for decades, a wealthy country that recently refused President Obama's demand to stop the settlements, an important first step to ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a conflict that makes Americans unsafe, according to General Petraeus. Do you wonder why nothing gets resolved in the Middle East? Money and powerful lobby influence. For peace, pressure your Democratic leaders to vote for me at the May convention. I'll fight to stop the endless funding for Israel and for lobby reform. I'm Lee Whitnam, candidate for the United States Senate, and I approve this message.
Jeffrey Leeds and former Secretary of State Colin Powell, in which he acknowledges that Israel has, quote, he says, 200 nuclear weapons. And the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has not been signed by Israel. Under U.S. law, the United States should cut off support to Israel because it's a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, according to Colin Powell, correct?
Shouldn't you ask Colin Powell that? I'm not going to speak to this particular traffic, and I'm certainly not going to discuss. So you're saying Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons? I'm certainly not going to discuss matters of intelligence from the podium. I have no comment on that.
Okay. Well, the email says the boys in Tehran know Israel has 200. We targeted on Tehran, and we have thousands. I mean, that seems to indicate that there's a knowledge of an Israeli nuclear program, which would make U.S. aid to Israel illegal.
I think I've answered your question.
Okay, well, let me ask, is that, do I have the correct understanding of U.S. law that we're not allowed to support a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty?
Look, we obviously support the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I'm not a legal expert on all the tenets of it, and I'm certainly not going to speak about the details that you've revealed here in this email traffic. That would be inappropriate for me to discuss one way or the other. I'm not going to do it.
There were sanctions imposed on North Korea in response to their nuclear proliferation. There were sanctions put on Iran in response to allegations of nuclear proliferation. And now we have this email from Colin Powell saying that Israel has 200 nuclear weapons. Why is Israel not facing any consequence for this?
That's a very colorful way of getting back to the same question you just asked me. But I'm going to refer you back to the transcript when you see it this afternoon to what I said before to your question. Saeed?
The latest poll out of Iowa shows that former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich and Texas Congressman Ron Paul are tied for first place. Mitt Romney is now a clear third. And while the media is still not covering Congressman Paul fairly, the Republican establishment seems to run from the man. One of the most common stated reasons is that many on the right say they are uncomfortable with what they call Congressman Paul's clear anti-Israel stance. But is Ron Paul really anti-Israel? Tonight, the facts and a reality check you won't see anywhere else. So how real is the concern over Congressman Ron Paul's position on Israel? Real enough that the Republican Jewish Coalition last week told the congressman that he was not invited to speak at a candidates forum, even though every other Republican candidate was invited. The same group also banned the congressman from speaking in 2007 as well. Now, let me just say that a private organization, the Republican Jewish Coalition, doesn't have to invite anyone. But what reason did the RJC give for excluding Paul? Well, they cited his, quote, misguided and extreme views on Israel. Tonight, we're going to take a look at 3 of those views. Now, there is plenty on the internet about Ron Paul's beliefs, but most of that has been debunked. Instead of using conjecture, tonight I'm looking at actual statements the congressman has made. Let's begin with the criticism of it's all Israel's fault, the idea that Ron Paul blames Israel for terror waged against it. Here's a video clip that reportedly proves it.
Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat. And you say, well, yeah, that was better then and it served its purpose, but we didn't want Hamas to do this. So then we as Americans say, well, we have such a good system, we're going to impose this on the world. We're going to invade Iraq and teach people how to be Democrats. We want free elections. So we encourage the Palestinians to have a free election. They do, and they elect Hamas.
The author of the blog where this was posted says that this is proof that Congressman Paul is anti-Israel. After all, he blames Israel for attacks from Hamas. He blames the United States for Hamas. But what does the congressman say? He says blowback, the military and intelligence term for consequence for foreign policy and interventions, is something the United States doesn't want to deal with, and yet is very real. But let's go further. Is he factually correct in what he said about Hamas? Yes. According to Anver Cohen, who worked for the Israeli government in religious affairs in Gaza for decades, he says it was 30 years ago when Israel tolerated and in some cases encouraged Hamas as a counterweight to the secular nationalists of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. So, it would be incorrect to say that Congressman Paul is blaming Israel for bombings by Hamas. Rather, his position appears to be warning about the consequence of blowback in both American and Israeli foreign policy. Which brings us to the second issue. Clearly, Ron Paul is anti-Israel, detractors say. After all, he wants to deny Israel foreign aid.
To me, foreign aid is taking money from poor people in this country and giving it to rich people in poor countries, and it becomes weapons of war, essentially. No matter how well motivated it is.
Congressman Paul, would you cut aid to Israel?
I would cut all foreign aid. I would treat everybody equally and fairly.
My name is Councilman Charles Barron, and I'm out here to join the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that this response by Israel to Hamas's violence was disproportionate. And I want to join others in the world who are condemning Israel strongly. This act of killing innocent women and children 370 was the last count that I had. 1,400 severely injured because you're responding to rocket attacks, when in fact the attack on Gaza happened seriously on November 5th, when Israel attacked and blockade shut off all trucks from coming in and out. They said that trucks, the average truck in October, truck delivery for food and medicine and other vital things in Gaza, the average delivery is about 123 trucks per day. It is now down to 4.6 trucks per day delivering necessities of life, from food, water, everything they need. The banks are collapsing, the hospitals are closing. So in fact, before any rocket launches, Gaza was a death camp. Gaza was a death camp set up by Israel. Innocent women and children dying, not getting medicine and food.
So Lou had y'all signing on to something he didn't even read, and it's based upon, he said someone told him that they went to the conference and someone's outside the conference handing out Zionism equals racism pamphlets. Well, people could do that. That's their right to do that. People could speak and say it's a hatred conference. Ask him to show you in the document that anti-Semitism exists. He can't do it, he didn't read it, and it's not there. So I encourage you to take your name off that bill. Thank you.